In the previous videos in the playlist link below the like button, we are going to be creating a submission form in Spring Boot. We're going to be using that same code right here, except we are going to connect this web application to a database to store this information and then use like a query to search through it. Now this code is not mine, it's based off a video. It's not my video, but it's in the description below the like button. It's a Spring Boot full course. This is just what I'm taking out of it. So first thing that we're going to want to do to connect to a database is we have our code and then we want to go into our application.properties. So this is all standard here. We have our server port, we have our Spring prefix and our Spring suffix, and this is for our MVC. When we're in our Maven dependencies, we need to be inside of our pages folder where we get our JSP files. We're dealing with .jsp here. Now we have our spring.h2.console.enabled set as true. And then we're going to set our data source platform to be h2. And then we are going to set our URL for the spring.datasource.url. We're setting that to a Jdbc or h2 mem. And then we're going to have our list of customers here. So this is for a list of customers. And this URL is going to come up later when we actually run this. So our submission forms is not going to change. We have everything here from the previous video. And then our submission application is also not going to change. This is in here from the last video as well. Next, we are going to have our customers.java. So we didn't touch this previously, but now we are going to use it in this one right here. And this is because we are going to make a kind of object of this customers. Every time we call from our form, we're going to call this so that we can add more customers in here. And then they're going to be distinguished by their @ID. So we'll come back to this in a second. We have our add customer details. Inside of here, all we're going to be doing is prompting for entry. And this is going to look like the following right here, where we enter our customer ID. We have our input type, so it's text, so we expect some text inside of here. We have our name, which is going to be stored in. So this is our customer ID. We're storing it inside of our CID, that's the name. And then we have text for our CNAME. So the input type, just like how it is input type up here, described as text, this one's going to be a submit. You can see the difference. And then the value is equal to this submit. So since this is the value of it, we're going to print it right here basically. And then we end our form, and then our body, and then our HTML. So that's going to be our add customer. Next we have our view customer details. So inside of here, we have view customer details, and this is going to look like the following. We can see that we have our method as post. So that's what it's going to be as. And then the actions is where we have details. So in our controller, when we call the details from like here or here, we have our add customer details, which is what this JSP file is. Now we have our view customer details. And this is just the same where we get the details in our form controller. So this controls everything. This is our controller. Get details is going to be here. And so our form action is going to be get details, where our method is post. We see method post here, action details, and then we have this right here as well, the method post. So that's just standard, I guess, and then we have our action get details. And then we have our input type, which is number. We have our name, CID, input type submit, value submit. So this is basically the same thing, except it's going to be slightly different. So for this one, it's going to look like this. We have our view customer details, and then it's going to be input custom ID. We'll go over what all this is when we run through the actual program for it in a second. But basically what we're doing here is all that we're doing, unlike the last one, is we just put the ID. So we can see that this is very similar to our previous one right here, just without this text out front. Just looking at this back part right here, 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 and here, it's basically the same thing. The only difference is we only have our CID, and then we have our submission part. So that's what we're going to put inside of here. That is the only thing that gets like executed in here. So that's our view customer details. In our form controller, this is where we're putting everything together. Now in the previous video, link below the like button, we use this code right here. Now you can see that this code is going to be actually very, very similar to our current code. However, it is going to be slightly different. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to have our @AutoWired. The @AutoWired is for dependency injection. So we have our @AutoWired here, and then we have this customer repo, and then we are having this object name be repo. So what is the object customer repo? Well, that is a class that we're going to make inside of here. We are going to make a new but instead of making it just like a normal class, it's not going to be a normal class. The customers repo is going to be an interface. So it is a Java interface, and that is what our auto wiring is doing right here. So we create our interface, we have our auto wiring, and then inside of here, we are going to have it like this. So this should be standard except for the extends part. We are going to extend the crude repository to get this. And then we're going to want to pass in our customers class, and then we're going to pass an integer. Now going back to our customers class from here, our integer is our @int ID. So our first thing here is our private int CID, and we're going to identify everything by the ID. This will make sense more when we run through the code. And this is an entity, by the way, so we need all this as an entity. And these are all just setters and getters in a toString inside of here. So that's going to be it for our custom repo, and then going over our customers.java. So inside of here, and when we just have localhost 80, so that means basically if there's just a slash in there or we don't put anything in there, just the localhost, we want to add our customers. So we have public string details, and then we go to a return of add customers. So we're going to return this right here if our action is details. And the action is going to be details because that is this method name. So we're going to be returning this. So this is what the customer is going to see. So basically our add gets printed out right here. We can see that if we are to delete that, and this is all we're going to get. Now we're going to input some values here for each of these, and then they're going to get stored. We can go back to our form controller. So fetching these details, we have our @request mapping, our /details, it fetches it, and then in our public string details, we're going to pass in as a parameter the class customers, and before we do anything, we do repo.save customers. So we're going to save the current object, which is what we just passed in, and then we're going to return our add customer details. So we're basically saving like the previous thing that we did here. We're saving it, and then we were just returning a new add customer details. So if we were to put something in here, something like this, and we press submit, it's going to take us to your /details right here, and it's going to look like this. So it's basically the same thing. It's just calling our add details once again right here, the add customer details. Next, we want to view those details. So how would we do that? We would do @request mapping /get details. And if we want to view the details, we'll have public string get details, that's the name of it, and then we're going to do the view customer details. That's calling this JSP file right here. And if we call that JSP file, where we do the /get details, it's going to look like this, which is what we coded for right here. And we can select whatever we want inside of here. We have to do post mapping, and this is for like /get details as well. The only difference here is that we're going to have a model and view, and we've previously gone over this in the playlist link below the like button. We're going to take a parameter in here, which is our int CID. The customer ID is going to differ everything inside of here. So we make a new instance of our model and view, MV. We're going to pass in retrieve. And what is retrieve? Well, retrieve is a new JSP file that we would make in our pages, new, other, JSP. And inside of here, this is where we're going to be retrieve customer details, details as submitted as follows, and then we have our customers right there. So this is basically what happens after we view it, right? So if we come back to our form, this get details is going to return the view customer details, which is like this. Well, what happens next if we click submit? That's going to be the retrieve. So if we click submit, where we have 1, I think we have 1, it's going to say that customer ID is 1, customer name is computer engineering, and the customer email is computerengineering@gmail.com. So that is going to call this in here. So this is our retrieval. It retrieves all of this, and it's going to retrieve our customers, which is this new object. So in our model and view, we are calling this retrieve right here. It's modeling it, viewing it, and then we're going to make a new instance of our customers class right here, and then we're going to set it equal to a repo. And the repo is this .java file that we made, which was an instance file. We auto-wired it up here, and we're using it down here. We're then going to do .find by ID, so we find the customer ID with here, or else it's just going to be null. So it's like an if-else statement. So we are going to try to find the customer ID, and then we're going to store that in our customers. We're going to store all that information inside of here, and then we're going to add this object to our model and view. So mv.addObject, and we're adding customers, and then we're returning our MV. So that's going to be it for our form controller. Our POM XML was not touched. Our application properties, we had to add these in. Our submission form was not touched. Our customers, we just made this an @ID so we can identify the ID. Made this an @entity so it's an entity. Inside of our add customer details, I might have changed a few names for some things, so that's also important to note. We just have a title to tell what this is. We have our form method, it's a post, and the action is when it's a details, and that's for when we have like this method being called right here. So that's the same name. Enter customer ID, enter customer name, enter customer email, and then we have our input type for all of these as text, and then we're storing it in these specific names, CID, CNAME, and CEmail. And then we have this submit down here, and that submit is going to be what allows us to submit it in just like this. And then we enter body and form, and it's very similar to here. This is basically the same thing for our view customer details, we're just viewing it. And now we have our form controller, which has everything about how we're going to be controlling this inside of here. Now I had to do a little bit of debugging, but now I'm pretty sure it works perfectly fine. This is our customers repo, it extends our CRUD repository, and then we have a retrieval as well. So now we're going to demonstrate all of this. To run this, we can just right click, and then we can go to run as Spring Boot application, or we can just terminate and run with this up here if it's not, or if it is already running. And we can see that it failed to start because the port's already in use. So we can either go reconfigure the port, or we can terminate what we're currently running and then rerun it again. If we terminate and rerun it, we can see that it should run without any problem right now. So it has ran, and what we're going to want to do is we can do localhost 8084, and we're just going to have it press enter like this. And this is because if we go back to our form, we're going to go through all the steps right here. If we have something like this, with our request mapping just being a slash, we want to return our add customer details, which is this right here. So now we're going to put in our customer information. Let's do like 1. This is our customer name, and our customer email is going to be down here. We can extend it so it's the same on the same line, and then we can press submit right here. And we can add something else. So let's go with 2. And then we will enter another customer name and another customer email. So we can press submit here. And it's just going to keep going on. So with our H2, because we haven't touched on it yet, in our applications properties, storing all of this in together, this is where we're storing it. It's going to look something like this. We can refresh it. So we're not going to touch anything except for our Jdbc URL. So for our Jdbc URL, it has to be the same URL that we have in our application.process right here. So this should be the same as this. Username is not going to change, and password, we're not going to change it for this. We can just click connect from here, and it's going to look something like this. So we can configure the max rows, we have all these settings right here, and we have our customers. This is the important part. We have our CID integer, we have our CEmail, and CNAME. They're both characters of varying types. We go more about varying types in a different playlist, but that's more about SQL and database design. So that's not really important here. What is important is running this. So to run our database, what we're going to do is a select, an asterisk, and then a form, and then we want our customers. So we can just click this, just a single click, not a double click, and then we can run this. And it looks like I did this wrong. This should be from, not form. And we can run it from here. And we can see that we get our CID, we can get our CEmail, and we get our CNAME as well for both of these. Well, what if we want to look at the details? We can close all of these, and we can look at the next step. So if we go to our form controller, this is going to happen. Our model and views done. Our /details, we know we're just basically adding more customer details. Then we want to view our details. So this is /get details. So let's change this a little bit. Instead of being /details, we're going to make it to be /get details. Now it says view customer details, input customer ID, which is what we wanted for our view customer details.jsp. So going inside of here, we know we have 2 possible CIDs right here. So we can pick from either of them. If we go like, let's say 1, this is what we get, and that's exactly what we wanted. It's going to match our database right here. Customer's CID is 1, it's printing out everything here. We can go back and make it 2, and then it's going to be what it is for 2. Now if we put 3, or anything that we don't have, like let's say 0, remember it's going to give us a null, so it's going to give us a /error fallback because we don't have anything here. Now that's going to be it for connecting our web-based application to a database, and we're querying through it. Super cool, but that's going to be it for this example. More will be in the playlist linked below the like button.